For discussion board 3 in HIUS 530, I chose to actually look at somebody that most people don't realize was actually part of the whole fundamental modernist controversy, and that's going to be Dr. John R. Rice. His dates are 1895 to 1980. He was born in Cook County, Texas, and his father was a layman preacher and one-time senator, and his mother passed away when he was 6 years old, and that's going to make a pretty big impression on him. He's going to profess his faith at the age of 12, and in 1923 he'll take his first pastoral position, and that's as an associate pastor of a Southern Baptist church there in Texas. However, by 1926 he is going to come under a friendship with J. Franks Norris, and he's going to leave the Southern Baptist Convention in 1927. Over the next few years, he's going to hold revivals in the state of Texas that are going to end up being promoted by J. Franks Norris. But the problem is going to be that the ministers in these local towns don't want these revivals being held. They don't support them. They don't promote them. And so when you've got a bunch of new believers who are coming into the faith through these revivals, and there were hundreds of them throughout his entire. Anytime he would have a revival, it would last sometimes weeks on end, and you would end up with huge numbers. So what he had to do was, over that first few years, about half a dozen churches would actually end up having to be built and created specifically for these new believers because the pastors didn't want them. So they're going to be, these churches are going to end up being labeled fundamentalist. Now, eventually, Norris and Rice are going to have a falling out. What I'm not 100% sure that I understand why they had a falling out, other than it had something to do with the fact that Dr. Rice was not going to bend to Norris's will, which from what I understand, Norris was one of those "it's my way or the highway." According to Howard Edgar Moore in his PhD dissertation, The Emergence of Modern Fundamentalism, John R. Rice and the Sword of the Lord, he tells you that Norris actually resorted to verbal and written threats. Basically told Dr. Rice that no man is going to get anywhere within the fundamentalist movement without the love and support of my church. Well, Dr. Rice is not going to let this deter him. He's actually going to go on to become one of the most prolific writers and revivalists in the 20th century in the fundamentalist movements. By 1934, he's created the Sword of the Lord. Now, it started out as a little publication for his church there in Texas, and its first printing actually had over 5,000 copies. By 1974, the circulation is going to be over 300,000. Now, I actually grew up reading the Sword of the Lord. My mom and dad had a subscription when I was a kid. And I can remember sitting there reading. I can remember actually hearing the sermons that he preached on tape, because when we lived in Germany, that was the only way we had service, because we didn't have a pastor. It was just 3 or 4 of us families meeting together in military housing, and we played Dr. Rice's sermons. So I guess you can say I'm a little bit influenced by Dr. Rice. But in terms of prolific writing, he had over 200 books and pamphlets. His most prolific one was What Must I Do to Be Saved? And it's going to be distributed in over 32 million copies in English, 8.5 million in Japanese, and nearly 2 million in Spanish. That's a lot of copies. But he commonly preached against religious liberalism, worldliness. He was highly against movies and Christians going to see them. He was against dancing and things of that nature. He railed against the immodest dress of women. You basically didn't wear pants and set foot in his church if you were a woman. So I kind of wonder what he would think today in some of these churches. But he also preached against humanism and evolution. Now, in 1945, he's going to organize evangelism conferences, which by 74 is going to be known as the Sword of the Lord conferences. You're going to see men like Hyman Appleman and Bob Jones Sr. involved in these. And you're also going to see that he's going to endorse a young Billy Graham. And in his editorial column in November 19th of 1948, he's going to state that he believes that Billy Graham could be the next D.L. Moody or Billy Sunday. However, by 56, they have a falling out, and he kind of distanced himself. By 1971, our Liberty University's own Dr. Falwell, along with Dr. Curtis Hudson, is going to join the board of the Sword of the Lord, replacing Bob Jones Sr. and Jr. And then in 1980, after Dr. Rice passes away, due to a stroke. Our very own Dr. Falwell will be one of the men to give the eulogy at his funeral.